This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
All right, Real Talkers, the golden age is upon us. So promises Donald Trump, anyway. The question is, are there silver linings for Canadians who may be having a tough time stomaching that Trump inauguration, his return to the White House? And for those of you that are cheering it, those of you that would have voted for the Republicans had you had the chance, members of our Canadian audience, what does this mean for Canada? What does it mean for our trade? What does it mean for border security or the future of the border, period? What about international alliances like NATO? What does it mean for the future of our federal government and diplomatic relations with the Trump White House? We're going to dig into all of this today with a longtime friend of mine. I've picked this guy's brain for, more than a decade. He's a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and a smart fella, as you're about to find out. If you don't know Dr. Bob Murray, he's coming up in 30 seconds as we get into that inauguration speech and those very first orders from the Trump White House. This episode is made possible with the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. You can find them at relo.ca. That's RELO.ca, where better real estate training starts. More and more people are looking to a career in real estate because, quite frankly, they're sick of that desk job. They're sick of being stapled to their cubicle. They're sick of that limited earning potential. You're bringing a lot to your workplace, but you just don't feel like they recognize that. You feel like you have so much more to offer. Relo gives you a shot at, basically hitting the ground running in a career that's set to boom. The population in our home province of Alberta and across Canada, of course, is growing. More and more people are looking to get into homes or, of course, looking to cash in on that nest egg, and they're looking for somebody to represent them well, somebody that understands the nuances, the human side of real estate. Relo's got a team of real live humans that can help you with their online webinars. They'll help you on the weekend. They'll help you as your schedule permits, get you set to write your exam, get your license, and of course, start your own business off on the right foot. You can learn more about the practice of residential and commercial real estate. Prep for those exams, but first you got to sign up. That's at relo.ca. Make sure you use the promo code Ryan100. That's all one word, Ryan100. If you sign up for the Alberta Commercial or the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle, it'll save you $100 on each of them at relo.ca.
Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again.
That's a standing ovation for the U.S. President Donald Trump. Few people didn't stand as we say hello to Dr. Bob Murray, senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, a political scientist, including among them President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, his vice president, of course. We're going to dig into some of the promises that were made, some of the big, bold statements that grabbed everybody's attention. And yes, we'll talk about Elon Musk's salute at some point. But your general impressions of what 47 had to say yesterday, with his hand off the Bible, by the way, taking the oath. Does that jump out at you as serious, significant? I know some evangelicals in my social circles were concerned about that.
Nothing surprises me because the entire Trump ethos is to be as unpredictable as possible. And I think by virtue of the mandate that he thinks he has, by virtue of what he has been able to glean throughout his campaign and the way that he does things, everything is theater. And everything is theater for the consumption of his folks and to be able to take some of these things forward. So nothing is ever just kind of pure symbolism. What's interesting about the Bible piece in particular, though, is throughout the campaign, of course, a number of American evangelicals were praising Trump's religiosity and his Christian ethics. And so to start things that way certainly sends a really interesting message to at least part of that Republican base.
Yeah, I know that there was I had read that there was, and this is normal, this is kind of standard protocol for an American president swearing in, that they'll typically bring a Bible or some other religious book that has significance to them personally. And my understanding is that this Bible had been in the Trump family for quite some time. So I thought it was a little bit strange that he didn't put his hand on it. It could have been in the moment, something that, I mean, these things get dissected at every angle and for obvious reasons. The eyes of the world were on this inauguration yesterday. I mean, part of it could be to kind of troll people. Part of it could be legitimately serious that he didn't want to put his hand on as he took the oath. I don't know. I guess I'm undecided on this one.
Or he could have forgot.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
This is the thing with trying to dissect and understand Donald Trump, is that the difference between what's intentional and what's not, what's theater and what's not, what we should read meaning to and what's not, is exactly what gets us distracted from some of the bigger muscle movement policy issues that are going on. And the fact that when you take a look at what people were paying attention to throughout the inauguration yesterday and some of the takeaways from it, and what we're talking about a little bit here today on the policy side and geopolitics, where his hand was at the time of inauguration will be a very small thing in 4 years' time.
Yeah, so why don't we talk about early priorities? And we're going to get to a lot of the stuff that Trump had to say, but I think this one, Johnny will load this up for us, his idea of putting America first. There's nothing new about this. This is what he campaigned on. He was talking about this before he ever declared any sort of interest in becoming president. I mean, in the early 2010s, Donald Trump was putting America first, or at least talking about it, but here's what he put on the record at the inauguration.
We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end.
So there's the president talking about American sovereignty, safety, the justice system. You know, we're doing this show in Canada for a largely Canadian audience. What are the implications for Canada here?
No shortage of implications. I think throughout that speech, first of all, throughout the campaign, throughout the transition period, and then yesterday, I think Canada and the world were put on notice that things are going to be different, that there's going to be expectations, certainly for Canada's sake, sharing the border, sharing a deeply ingrained and entrenched economic relationship, an ingrained and entrenched defense, national defense relationship. There are going to be not only changes expected, but different points of leverage when we try to figure out what it is he actually cares about. So what Trump says is not always what Trump means. It's figuring out which parts of the agenda really do matter to him and what it is where he sees opportunities for wins, right? So America first means America winning. And even if there is no victimhood for America to be played, like the entire narrative that he's presented is American victimhood. If there is no victimhood, he still needs to stand up and proclaim wins. And we saw that in his first term. And we're going to see this, I think, this very much so in this term, which is even if we can use facts to say there is no significant trade imbalance on certain industries that he points to, even if we are pulling our weight in certain things, that doesn't matter because he's got to be able to stand up, and it matters to him to be able to stand up in that theater that is a Trumpian president to say, I was able to get our allies to do X, Y, Z. And as Canada, I think right now what we have to be able to figure out to do is what does he care about and what are those points of leverage and how are we going to be able to find a way to move past what's almost like a political ick into working with this administration for the next 4 years, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not. This is now the reality.
Fascinating to see Joe Biden issuing pardons to like family members, saying that this does not indicate or implicate them in any crime, that movement's happening. There's talk about drilling. There's talk about COVID payback, talk about America recognizing only two genders. We're going to get into all of this, but tariffs are what Canadians have been talking about for the past month. Tariffs are what Canadian talk shows have been talking about, what Canadian journalists have been writing about. They're what interviews with industry have been all about. And Trump announcing yesterday that tariffs, well, basically Canada, Mexico, other nations can circle February 1st on their calendar. That's when he plans to impose them.
Of 25% on Mexico and Canada because they're allowing vast numbers of people. Canada's a very bad abuser also. Vast numbers of people to come in and fentanyl to come in.
When do you think you would enact those?
I think February 1st.
Are you planning on giving notice of that?
I think we'll do it February 1st.
25% on both, sir.
On each.
On each.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you have it. I mean, the 25% is not a secret. Some people go, okay, well, we were expecting it on day one, so maybe February 1st gives, the Canadians 10 days to 8 days a week to figure it out. You know what jumps out at me? Canada is a very bad abuser. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm not trying to be dramatic. We had a 99-year-old D-Day veteran sitting in the same chair you're sitting in about 2 months ago. And I just think of the times that Canadian and American servicemen and women have stood together. I think of 9/11 and Canadians opening their doors to the Americans when all the airports were shut down. I think of a million different things. I think of Quebec-based water bombers flying over Santa Monica, extinguishing fires a couple of weeks ago. Like, am I being too dramatic to feel like a clenching of the gut, to actually be a little bit pissed off? To hear the most powerful person in the world describing our country as a very bad abuser? Or do I need to look at this through a business lens?
Both. I think Canadians should take exception to the rhetoric that we hear. It is intended to be inflammatory. It's intended to elicit a reaction. And the question really, I think, that the Trump administration is asking is, how far are you willing to go to maintain this relationship between Canada and the U.S.? I think it's important that we accept that all of those historical examples that you just noted, which are exceptionally important to Canada and Canada's national identity, don't matter to this administration. What matters to the administration is the here and now of overcoming the issues that matter most to them. And also don't forget that throughout the history of the Canadian-American relationship, even since World War II, we've had significant points of disagreement. It hasn't always been hugs and kisses every time we see each other, but we found a way to disagree and be able to move through those disagreements in a way that tried to maintain the relationship because of what was at stake. I think what we see this time is we see an American president that defines America's national interests differently than we have been used to, and is willing to take and use tactics that we are frankly not used to seeing in the world of global diplomacy. And so to all of the issues that you've just mentioned, I think the response you'd get from the Trump administration is, yeah, but. And what are you going to do about these issues that we care about and that we've promised Americans, frankly, that by saying that you're going to put America first, that there has to be some kind of progress made on them? And so if you're the Canadian government, and we're looking at this from a Canadian lens, some of the pieces that they have pointed to, so whether it's the 2% spending on our defense, we have intentionally, knowingly not caught up in any way, shape, or form to that target until Trump was elected, and suddenly we started hearing promises of spending. What we don't know, by the way, from either a Liberal Party or a Conservative Party is what we would actually spend it on to have a coherent international strategy. So we're saying that we will start spending the money now because he got reelected.
2% of GDP, right?
Correct. But the key is that we are so far behind on some of that spending that will be a drop in the bucket to be able to achieve certain levels of defense preparedness and readiness. And we still, again, don't have a process outlined to have an international strategy that can even articulate to Canadians what that money would be specifically spent on and why that's in our national interests. I think one of the most important pieces in dealing with a president saying that he's going to unapologetically and aggressively pursue America's national interests is we don't know what ours are all the time. And that's leading to division. We're seeing that amongst the premiers right now. We're seeing that between the provinces and the federal government, is that we haven't had that kind of national leadership and unity to say these are Canada's national interests in an increasingly complex global political landscape, and this is what we're going to rally around. And so instead, we're on our back heel. We are reacting to what could have been predicted from Trump. And so when we look at tariffs, for instance, the question is, and I think you're exactly right, Ryan, which is we have 10 days to figure out what it is they need us to do, what progress we need to make on certain policy issues where we may see at least an alleviation of that promise either as a whole or on certain sectors.
But who is it to do that? I showed this yesterday. People can check it out themselves. Alberta's Premier. It's all over her Instagram at AB Danielle Smith. I mean, she has been all over D.C. She's been at the parties. She's been rubbing shoulders with high-profile Republicans and injured Oilers star Evander Kane, apparently, who's at all the Republican parties. But Danielle Smith is down there saying that she's representing Alberta's best interests, obviously doing everything she can to plant seeds wherever she can. Meantime, pretty much all of her colleagues meeting in Canada, the First Minister's meeting last week, they signed on to something. Alberta, the only signatory. Danielle Smith says we're not signing, says we need to start putting Canada first. You got, respectfully, a lame duck prime minister who's announced his resignation as leader of the party. He'll stay on until he's replaced. Parliament's prorogued. Nothing's happening. Pierre Poilievre's not doing much. I'm not sure it's appropriate for him to do much. He's not the prime minister of Canada. So, Bob, what the hell?
Well, this is exactly the problem. And, we can look to the current situation with the national government in Ottawa and say that the prime minister is resigned. He's a caretaker right now until the Liberal Party chooses its leader. But this has been the prime minister now for a decade. And in that decade, we haven't been rallied around a coherent international strategy or foreign policy that we would be able to look to, even in recent years, to be able to say, these are the things that we care about and this is how we're going to approach this. The other side of it, of course, is that the division between Ottawa and the premiers is not unique to Alberta. It's just that we divide on, and premiers divide on different sectors or issues that affect their individual provinces. Bear in mind that there was a time when Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau were buddy-buddy. They were all over the place and the photo ops were rampant. That started to decline as Ontario's interests sometimes conflicted with the national government. I think what we're seeing from Premier Smith, I'm of two minds about it. So first of all, I think that there is a credible argument to be made that the current government in Ottawa is not going to represent the interests of Alberta's energy sector the way the Premier of Alberta will. And by virtue of some ideological similarities, she would be a powerful spokesperson to Trump's people on that issue. That said, the more that she goes out on her own and risks alienating her Premier colleagues, so even if we leave the Prime Minister out of the equation, alienating other premiers, How
about alienating other conservative premiers?
But conservatism means different things to different provinces at this point.
Sure, but it seems like Doug Ford's pretty pissed off.
Absolutely, he's going to be. But Doug Ford also is worried about the auto sector, right? And we hear what Trump is saying about killing EVs, et cetera, when Ontario and the auto sector started making arrangements for increasing production and some of that. So this is the problem with having the lack of national leadership from a government in Ottawa that's putting Team Canada together to field the premiers and to say, there's going to be time and space for you to talk about your individual sectors, but here is kind of the national plan and to get that feedback. In the absence of that, we have premiers that are willing to stick together as long as it serves their individual interests. Canada as a whole are not electing these premiers. Danielle Smith and Premier Smith also has a base that she has to talk to here in Alberta and to make sure that she has Albertans behind her in her approach as she is approaching this issue. And we know that this issue is significant.
So I agree with you on sort of the two minds thing, and I've laid it out here on the show before. Like number one, it is a premier's job to represent the best interests of their province, and I know that a lot of people are sitting here going, well, that's what Danielle Smith's doing, and then others are going, well, yeah, but it's every premier's job to represent the best interests of their province, and yet they're all still sitting down. I think we may have audio from Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew coming up here in just a second, and I'll throw to that. But so I do, like, on one hand, I think obviously Danielle Smith's going to be down there advocating for oil and gas and advocating for Alberta. There's nothing wrong with that. When it comes at the expense of a national unity strategy, when it comes at the expense of maybe attending these First Ministers meetings, of being there, of Alberta being the only outlier. Now, you and I both know this audience is smart enough to know that there's a certain percentage of Alberta's population that will love that. Based on the simple fact that we're not participating, they will love it.
And I'm going to bet a lot of those folks are UCP supporters.
Sure. And probably ones that maybe many of them that bought memberships or maintained memberships to vote specifically for her in a leadership race, right?
Yes.
And she's no fool, and her leadership review at the AGM proved that she's onto something with the membership base, and so she's experiencing popularity right now, and she's going to keep going back to that well. I also think that when you have connections, I'm in a business of connections. How do we get interviews? How do we line up opportunities? A lot of times it's who you know. A lot of times it's who you can go through. She's shared stages with, whether people like it or not, Tucker Carlson, Jordan Peterson. She's friendly with a lot of that American establishment. She's talked a lot about her admiration for Ron DeSantis. Like, obviously, these are inroads to the Trump White House. Like, if you don't think that you can get Donald Trump's attention by being friendly with Tucker Carlson, I think that you're fooling yourself. So I understand the methodology there. The bigger picture, though, is you know, we've you and I have participated in this conversation on talk radio 10 years ago. Are you a Canadian first, or are you an Albertan first? And you talk to different people, you'll get different answers. You know, ultimately, I think at the end of the day, when you're talking bottom line, when you're talking about commerce and trade, when you're talking about oil and gas exports, etc., like, that's a bigger picture than just ideology around how people identify. You got to wonder what the strategy is and whether or not it's going to pay off or bite Alberta in the ass.
And there is political risk for the Premier of Alberta in putting herself out there on her own. If on February 1st, tariffs are imposed on the energy sector, there is a risk, of course, that politically she owns the potential failure of what is perceived as a lobbying strategy. So how far out front you go is a really careful and delicate balance. Clearly, the perception is that, and I don't think that she's incredibly wrong on this. Actually, I should say, I don't think she's wrong at all on this, which is that if the expectation is that the current government in Ottawa and the current ministers in Ottawa that have, for better or for worse, depending on one's ideological standpoint, vilified Alberta's oil and gas sector for the better part of a decade, if we expect them to devise a Team Canada strategy that Albertans and the Alberta government can get behind that will reasonably advocate for the interests of the oil and gas sector, I think that's problematic. But don't forget as well that, you know, Premier Doug Ford was on Fox News pretty quickly after the Trump election. So other premiers have been engaging in mediums that will attempt to reach the White House. I think right now the question is, has Premier Smith gone too far out front for the appetite of not just her colleagues, but Canadians as a whole? And what are those Canadian interests versus Alberta's interests, and where do they align and where do they not? And so if we know that and have been told that from the federal government for a long time, that the way that Albertans and the Alberta government define the oil and gas sector don't align with the interests or the definitions in Ottawa, where is that fine line that you sit at the table and don't say anything versus knowing that not only, by the way, would it be crippling for Alberta if you see a significant tariff regime put on oil and gas, but it would be crippling for Canada. So Canada's interests are at play, but the messaging and the messenger matters. And it is a delicate balance. And I think the Premier has clearly shown how she defines that balance, that she's willing to go it alone and she's willing to absorb that risk amongst her colleagues.
So talking about messaging, there's sort of like two different NDP politicians. One of them, a federal MP not seeking re-election, Charlie Angus. People can check out our YouTube shorts if you want to see him absolutely rip Trump a new one. This was wild. Calling him a pervert, among other things, on a podcast, the Midas Touch podcast, just the other day. Wild. Check out our YouTube channel for that. And then you have Manitoba's Premier, Wab Kinew, who's kind of takes a really diplomatic, like, this is about as Canadian as it gets. He delivers it with a smile. It's, for the most part, completely positive. It's just about a minute. I thought it might sort of focus this conversation a little bit. If you haven't heard it, here's Manitoba's Premier, Wab Kinew.
I hope that there's Canadian pride in the fact that you can have Liberals and Conservatives and New Democrats and nonpartisan leaders coming together to stand up for your jobs and for your way of life. And I hope that that sense of pride that we have at Canada with a functioning political discourse like that spills out into the broader society, so that when you go to the store, that Canadian pride leads you to buy that made in Canada product. That when you make your big decisions, that you choose to make investments here. We need a national economic strategy that builds on the pride of the worker who builds things and makes things in this country, so that our kids and our grandkids are going to have a much more prosperous, even more prosperous Canada than we have today. And I'd hope that your Canadian pride also filters into your decisions about where to take your vacations this summer. Yes. And to, spend some more dollars here at home. Manitoba is beautiful. In the summertime, you have an open invitation, and now we're all going to trip over each other, inviting everybody to the respective regions. Winnipeg Jets may be on a playoff run.
Okay, come on, Bob.
But the point is, Canadian pride is something that we can really lean on right now. And there are few things that unite Canadians more, for better and for worse, than our neighbor to the south. And so right now, as you see leaders coming together, I think it's a great moment for Canadians to come together as well.
Thank you very much, Premier.
So there you have it. Ontario, or rather Manitoba's Premier Rob Canoe. You could hear Ontario Premier Doug Ford in the back when he starts talking about vacationing. So he goes, yeah, and then he throws in hockey, and then Ford knew that he better stop talking because everybody knows what's going to happen to the Leafs this playoff run. But I digress. That's kind of a Canada First strategy, a positive interpretation or positive representation of the relationship with the Americans, that neighborly relationship near the end. But Rob Canoe's talking about, hey, take your vacations here, buy made in Canada products. The cynic in me isn't so sure that people actually do that. I think that, people talk about shopping local and then go to Amazon because it's more convenient. Someone will write me an angry email saying, no, they shop local whenever they can, and I applaud you. I think that's wonderful. But Canada cannot go it alone. I love the idea of vacationing in Canada. I love the idea of keeping your dollars in Canada. I love the premise of Canada First, and Pierre Poilievre tweeted that. He said, we will put Canada first, period. He tweeted that just about a week ago. But how badly does Canada need the United States?
Oh, it is our most important trade partner, economic partner, military strategic partner. Our existence since the end of World War II has been inextricably linked with the history and future of the U.S. And so it is, what we can be doing, and this was something that we had to do at the formation, really, of Canadian foreign policy in the wake of World War II, was how is it in a bipolar world at the time, the Cold War world, that you were going to be able to align interests and work with the U.S., but still be an independent nation? And one of the key foreign policy tools that Canada used, amongst others, was multilateralism. We worked within international institutions and through alliances to leverage our economic power. We knew, of course, our military power was limited, and that's how this idea of being a middle power really came about, as we intentionally and strategically carved out a place for ourselves where we were able to pursue and enhance Canada's national interests as global national interests. We were able to try to diversify some of those trade relationships, some of those diplomatic relationships, et cetera. And I think part of the challenge that we have right now is that it isn't necessarily that it's Canada first, because it does need to be a Canada First strategy, by the way, that we need to get our act together and all get on the same page. But right now, by virtue of the foreign policy failures of the last decade, at least, if not longer than that, it's Canada alone. Because some of the traditional platforms that we would have relied on to enhance our place and to be able to possibly garner support for some of our positions, we've neglected by virtue of not having a robust and coherent foreign policy. And there are consequences to it. It isn't, at this point, it isn't an abstract conversation. And so when you look at whether it's defense alliances, whether it's economic alliances, diplomatic alliances, we have not been present in the world in a coherent way. So now, really, Ryan, look at this, is that we can't even get on the same page within Canada to put forward a Team Canada strategy with one state and the most important ally that we have. How can we possibly think right now, by virtue of the disarray and chaos, that we're in a position to very quickly get on the same page throughout Canada to then go to the rest of the world with a coherent message to not be alone?
Yeah, that feels like me to be more of a campaign strategy. That feels to me to be something that, for example, the Poilievre camp or whomever is going to lead the Liberals forward, whatever the case may be, is going to have to take on as a challenge, as a number one strategy. Dwayne Bratt was on this show the other day, and I think he was absolutely right. He said that he says that whoever the Liberal leader is, to do more than just save the furniture, is going to have to change the narrative on what this next federal election is. It's not a carbon tax election, not even close. It's an election about how Canada responds to Donald Trump. And I think he's obviously bang on that. I don't know if you disagree. Feel free to say so if you do. But Jillian here with some criticism aimed at you, Bob, and I know you're not afraid of it, but she basically says, and our chat is humming right now, so it's already disappeared. Powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. Jillian says, this guy, Dr. Murray, is describing a transactional relationship with the United States, and she says that's not going to work. It's never worked.
I'm not really sure how else we would define the relationship outside of certainly with the Trump administration is inherently transactional. It's a business relationship. So the good news apple pie, shared values, et cetera, that is not resonating. We know that that's not resonating. And he's made it really clear that those things aren't going to resonate. This is going to be about figuring out, first of all, the Trump administration loves to boast and be boastful around either states or opponents that they think are weak. And so right now we are perceived as weak, and he sees us as the weaker partner. And I think our internal situation demonstrates that quite clearly. So in order for us to be able to salvage the relationship and actually grow a relationship where we are able to be economically entrenched with a Trump administration, it is going to be at least somewhat transactional, because that is the nature of the relationship, and that's international affairs for the most part. There are shared values, shared interests, but a lot of this is going to have to be, how is it that we are going to convince the Trump White House and those around Trump to see us as credible, as powerful, and worth taking seriously throughout the processes around talking about some of these really key issues, when what they know and what we know is that some of these pieces, whether they are real or not, we have either neglected or we haven't taken seriously, regardless of what he said in his first administration, what he said during the campaign, or what he has said since.
Erica's in our chat. She says, I love Canada. She says, I love being Canadian, but the reality is we're not strong. I don't even want to ask you this. Is she right? I mean, we're proud. We're proud. And you can't tell folks on the international stage in athletics that we're not strong. And you can't say that our resolve is not strong. And you can't say that we haven't punched outside our weight class. But all things considered, what's the reality check here? Is Erica right?
Depends on how you define strong. Militarily, no. Geopolitically, diplomatically right now, probably not. Economically, yes. I mean, we have a functioning economy. Is it suffering right now, and do we need some changes? Absolutely, I think that's the case. But we are not a minor economic player in the global political landscape. And that has always, by the way, been part of our reality. And that's why, again, I go back to what I said about middle powers, and the concept of middle powermanship as it was defined throughout the Cold War was, we knew we were not going to pursue nuclear arms. We knew we were not going to pursue an aggressive militarization strategy. So we had to capitalize on what we did have and what we were good at. And that was leveraging that economic power through multilateral alliances that gave us an opportunity to dialogue with a number of other states outside of just the U.S. and to be able to play at times a facilitating role, at times a leading role. By abdicating that, I think is really where the glaring weakness is that has to be considered and fixed as quickly as possible.
A political scientist, Dr. Bob Murray, is our guest, a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. We'll be looking back to our live chat powered by Park Power. In the second half of this episode, we're going to get to some of Trump's strategies, including drill, baby, drill, plus some of the stuff that happened after he took the oath of office, including that salute from Elon Musk. What are you making about that, Real Talkers? You can let us know. I know some people are saying full-on Nazi salute. I saw somebody talking about some sort of a Roman salute. Some folks are invoking his Asperger's syndrome, talking about he's just trying to say from my heart to yours. I don't know. We'll go there before this episode wraps. But first, arts lovers, I have a message for you on behalf of our good friends at Edmonton Opera. They've got an amazing production coming up, a profoundly moving production of Bluebeard's Castle at the beginning of February. This is where love takes center stage. And you're invited to experience the power of love and memory in Bluebeard's Castle from the Theatre of Sound in London. Judith's journey through Bluebeard's doors becomes a poignant exploration of dementia, identity, and the heart. It's directed by Daisy Evans with a new English libretto and music arranged by Stephen Higgins, a story that will resonate deeply with anyone touched by memory loss. Don't miss Bluebeard's Castle, February 1st, 4th, 6th, and 7th at the Jubilee Auditorium. You can get your tickets today at edmontonopera.com. I have a message from North Road Investment Council for those of you that are in the business of business, and those of you that are wanting to protect your business and your family. I want to talk to you about securing your financial future with North Road Investment Council. Whether you're planning for retirement, growing your wealth, or navigating complex markets, North Road's team of experts led by Marshall and Carey will craft personalized strategies for investing, financial planning, insurance, and digital risk advisory. They're the only ones in the space offering that service, and it's all included in what they do. They're a steady hand and a studied voice. You can learn more about what makes them different by visiting their website, northroadic.com. I'm getting pretty excited for this weekend. Let me tell you, the 25th of January at the Edmonton Convention Center, Hall D, Bang for buck, this is the most magnificent, the most spectacular venue in Alberta's capital city. And I want to invite you, if you don't have it already, to get your golden ticket to the hottest night in Edmonton's business scene. That's Chamber Ball 2025. I'm thrilled to be returning as host. We're talking about top-tier connections, phenomenal food, and an electric energy that will remind you why Edmonton is the best place to do business. This is Edmonton's biggest business party of the year, and we're bringing together the city's movers and shakers for a big night of big ideas and even bigger celebrations. It'll be co-hosted with the CEO of Edmonton Chamber, Doug Griffiths, and you can get your golden ticket today by visiting edmontonchamber.com. And before we get back to Bob Murray, I want to remind you that if you have it on your to-do list this year, if you promised yourself, by the way, the cynics are saying that this is the time of year. They actually say we're already past the time of year where people are abdicating their New Year's resolutions. I invite you to stick with it. You meant it when you made it at the end of December to get organized, to get decluttered. California Closets is ready for that free consultation. I've participated before. You visit their showroom. It's absolutely stunning. They grab you a coffee. They grab you a sparkling water. You sit down with their team of designers and they will wow you with the ideas they'll come up with, working with your budget. I know what you're thinking. You're going, I don't have $300,000 to do a closet. Not even close. They can work with any budget, any vision, in any circumstance for any room in your home. You can check out their client stories, see how they've improved the lives and homes of clients across Canada, and book that free consultation today by visiting californiaclosets.ca. I love this from Sharon in our live chat, a personal touch. She says, Wob is such a nice person in real life. She's talking about Manitoba's Premier, Wob Canoe, of course. If you're just joining us, we're hanging out with Dr. Bob Murray, a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and an expert in Canada, U.S., and international relations. Obviously, gleaned big applause from the crowd indoors at the inauguration, at the swearing-in, when Donald Trump announced that it was time to tap into America's natural resources in a way that they've never done before. So if you're working on the rigs, if you're involved with drilling and you're living stateside, this is good news. We'll find out in a second from Bob what it means for Canada, in particular on the prairies. But first, here he is, Donald Trump.
The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. Let me use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote.
He talks a lot about where he did tremendously with his vote. He said the same thing talking about TikTok. But what does this mean for, they talk about how a speech from a president or international leader can move markets. This is a real example. But what do you make of the promises? And ultimately, let's bring it back to what it means for Canada.
Well, first and foremost, I heard two things there. Some was on energy and some was on manufacturing, right? So Alberta and Ontario in particular are going to be paying closest attention to what that's going to mean for Canada as that increased output. I mean, buying the vehicle of your choice. You can buy the vehicle of your choice right now in America depending on how much money you have. And so the view and the promise of bringing prices down is actually one of the more interesting pieces of that promise. Certainly in the manufacturing sector, how you get around labor costs will be a really interesting part of that conundrum. On the oil and gas side of things and the energy side of things, I think for Alberta in particular and for Canada, when we take a look at the increased opportunities for American output, and what that would possibly do to the importing that the U.S. currently does of Canadian energy and Canadian oil, that's really going to be at the heart of figuring out what Alberta's strategy is going to be. And that's also part of why you see Premier Smith advocating as strongly as she has been. It isn't just about tariffs, it's also about this other variable. So the double whammy for Canada would be an industry being tariffed as well as significantly increased American outputs that come at the expense possibly of those imports coming from Canada. The other side of this, of course, is the promise of exporting to other nations in the world. I mean, we certainly know that the U.S.'s energy relationships in other geostrategic areas internationally matter to their alliances. And so how they're going to run that by some of their other allies will also be a really interesting conversation. But make no mistake, if we are in a situation where our energy sector is going to be tariffed and we see an increased output from U.S. domestic energy, that is the double whammy impact to not just Alberta, but to Canada. And that's something that I think Team Canada, as it has to be envisioned moving forward, and Alberta will have to be advocating very strongly on.
What do you make of this? There's obviously sort of, within the Liberal Party, to call it turmoil might sort of be understating it
a little bit.
They're the governing party right now, but just barely a minority party that knows that as soon as Parliament returns, that there will likely be a vote of non-confidence. The NDP is saying as much. It's a leaderless party at this point. You have, I think, what has been, obviously long rumored to be coming, Chrystia Freeland seeking the leadership. The theme of her campaign launch over the weekend, which I thought was a curious move, is that she has fought before and will continue to fight and can fight Trump and can be successful. You've got Mark Carney bringing considerable experience as governor of the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, longtime board member, $1 trillion, yada, yada, yada. Everybody knows Mark Carney. And then you'll have some other players that may or may not enter the fray. But really, talk on shows like this and basically every talk show that addresses the obvious is that this is a leader that's stepping into a messy situation, perhaps even a Kim Campbell-esque type situation. And this is the Conservatives' move. This is something that, all eyes will be on Pierre Poilievre, if polling proves to be correct, to sort of sort this out with Donald Trump. With regards to the state of Canadian politics right now, what would you say, who is the onus most on right now? Do you have, I don't know if you want to go on the record, but if you have an early favorite or somebody that's catching your attention in the Liberal leadership race, and ultimately, as well with Pierre Poilievre, what's the right move for him?
I learned the hard way about a decade ago not to predict in the media, so I probably won't
What's
go
your
there.
worst political prediction? I'll say mine. What's yours?
Like ever?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was election night in 2015.
Me too.
Yeah, and I looked like an idiot.
I predicted that Jim Prentice was going to lose seats and retain government, and boy, they sure did not.
Yeah, I said the same.
Yeah.
And I still remember that quite fondly. And other people will remind me of it. But I would say that in this situation, the incumbency is on the Prime Minister to be leading. And in the absence of a strong Prime Minister right now, because don't forget, we have the Trudeau situation, who is in more of that caretaker position. New Liberal leader is going to be elected, but still in turmoil. Whether it's going to be spring or whether it's going to be fall, it's going to be very difficult for them to have any kind of mandate. Then we get through an election period. And of course, throughout the campaign, you're going to see all campaigns, the Conservative Party of Canada, Liberal Party, NDP, Bloc, etc., are going to be on the campaign trail talking about the relationship with the U.S. And then whoever takes over, depending on whether it's a majority or a minority government, and if it is Pierre Poilievre in a majority situation moving forward, of course the priority is going to be how to deal with the U.S. But we are at least months off of any resolution to that ambiguity. Even a spring election, we're still only in January. And so that leaves us exceptionally vulnerable without that strong national leadership. And make no mistake, the Trump administration and the Americans know that. That's exactly part of why we're getting what we're getting from them at this point. They know, and they are capitalizing on the chaos that's happening around Ottawa right now. And so that's why, frankly, there was a lot of pressure when the Prime Minister decided he was going to take a couple weeks over Christmas to ski and think about his future. From the moment that it became clear that at least a Trump 2.0 was going to be possible, there needed to be action on the side of this country to start pulling together people, premiers, resources, experts to start devising a strategy to be able to take a united Canadian message forward and start building that relationship. Instead, what we saw was months worth of, frankly, some Canadian politicians and influencers teeing off on Donald Trump. The same kind of sanctimonious approach that I think we've seen in Canada for a decade started being used against the U.S. They have long memories. And it's not like Americans can't get video clips of what is said in Canadian politics. So it's not just about the chaos. It's also about, at times, our current Prime Minister and his party have tried to heighten their domestic political situation here in Canada at the expense of Donald Trump. And so now all of a sudden you have that acrimony between the personalities added on top of the chaos, added on top of an ambiguity and lack of clarity over the next few months of exactly what is going to happen. So this idea of putting Canada first and Team Canada, et cetera, it's important. It has to happen. But who takes the reins and has the credibility and legitimacy to corral the premiers, to be able to get them together to say, this is what I think we need to do, and then to have the premiers and a prime minister sit in Washington, or to have somebody sit in Ottawa at our table, having those conversations seems like a long shot, at least at this point.
Do you, I'm just basing this on personality. I see Justin Trudeau, I mean, obviously now you've got to look, it's too early to talk legacy and it's too late to talk about saving it. Do you know what I'm saying? He's in that kind of gray area right now where you can really only evaluate. I mean, I see a lot of people talking about how they missed George W. Bush yesterday. There were a lot of people going, gosh, I used to be so hard on W, and now I kind of like the guy. I know we'll get comments in the chat about aggression in Iraq and weapons of mass destruction and the like, but the point is, time does an interesting thing. Time has an interesting impact as people evaluate politicians' legacies. Say the same thing of Margaret Thatcher or anybody else. But with Justin Trudeau right now, he sort of struck me as having that type of personality, especially early on, where he could inspire people. He did inspire people. And I think he made some efforts, although a lot of times, sort of insulting. I know he put his hands on people in the House of Commons and all that, and that sort of raised the ire of Conservatives. But you sort of saw him as somebody who, at least on the exterior, came across as though he was interested in bringing together, let's say, premiers representing different political parties. He's a prime minister that could, with some decorum, bring together an NDP, a Liberal, and a Conservative premier. Pierre Poilievre strikes me as different. Like he's sort of like, respectfully comes across prickishly, and I think that it's a calculated move. It's he's always kind of had that, and it's working for him. Don't get me wrong, but he has a bit of a. He bristles at things. He's sort of like, his eating the apple in the orchard, sort of being really tough on that small market journalist that found himself maybe a little bit out of his depth. There's these moments where Poilievre is abrasive and unapologetic, and I just have a really hard time. And you'll probably say to me, well, he's not yet been prime minister, and you got to give him a chance to be the prime minister, and you got to give him a chance to do the job. But he strikes me as less inclined to be interested or able to meaningfully rally provincial representatives from different parties and actually come across like he's legitimately interested in hearing them out, in representing their interests, or in considering them in policy moving forward. That's more of a statement than a question. I'm interested in your response.
He won't have a choice. When you're negotiating with Canada, you're, by virtue of the way that we're structured, and think of USMCA, it isn't a one-to-one negotiation. The premiers and the provinces have a seat at the table. Canada's provinces have long been foreign policy actors. We look at the number of provincial offices that exist in the U.S., that exist internationally. So it's not unusual that premiers and provinces are foreign policy actors, and prime ministers have always had to strike a balance as to exactly what they're going to take forward. And in this situation, I don't think Mr. Poilievre, if he won tomorrow, would have an option but to find a way to rally. Now, what the rallying cry is and how he manages that table remains to be seen. I think some of what you've talked about is, don't forget that, politics, again, and a lot of politics is theater. So a lot of that persona and character has been, unique to Mr. Poilievre, but also in direct contrast, intentional direct contrast to what we get from our current prime minister. And so when you go from leader of the opposition and campaigning to possibly governing, we see oftentimes people are going to shift. Advisors are going to shift, personalities are going to shift, cabinet is going to would shift, et cetera. And so all of those things would play a role. But whether a leader wants to or not, and I think this is exactly the situation that we've been in a little bit with Mr. Trudeau, is that early on, did he try? Sure. But more recently, have we heard from the premiers that they have felt heard from the current prime minister? The answer is no. And that's part of why he's having trouble rallying them right now. And so when you take over as prime minister, regardless of who wins the next federal election, they have no choice but to be crafting constructive working relationships with the premiers, because exactly the type of reaction that we're seeing to some of Premier Smith's actions right now can only be put on steroids if other premiers start to feel that there's no value working with Team Canada.
We're talking to Dr. Bob Murray. I want to ask you a couple of things before we let you go, and I want to go into the kind of the social stuff in a second. Trump's talking about two genders, but first, as Joe Biden makes his way out, he did, he issued more presidential pardons. Nothing necessarily unusual there. Presidents do it on their way out, but it catches people's attention when he starts pardoning members of his family. And we've got some folks here in the live chat wondering for your take on that and why you think that Joe Biden is pardoning his family. There was kind of an interesting development as well, and I wanted to play this audio for our audience members back in 2020, in December of 2020, when Joe Biden's coming in and Donald Trump's leaving. Joy Reid on MSNBC is interviewing California Senator Adam Schiff. Have you seen this? And she's asking him, as Trump has issued some preemptive pardons to people, including members of his family, the anchor on MSNBC, Joy Reid, asks the senator out of California if he's ever heard of somebody innocent getting a preemptive pardon. And here's what he said in December of 2020.
Have you ever heard of somebody getting a preemptive pardon who was innocent of all crime? Who's just an innocent person? Have you ever heard of that? Just somebody getting a blanket pardon and they're an innocent person?
But no, I think that it's an effort not only to prospectively pardon people for things they have not yet been charged with and may never be charged with, but also it's the president's own family. It's people that have been covering up for the president in addition to his own family. This is the nature of those the president has surrounded himself with, including his family. And that is, it's been essentially a den of thieves environment. And so I think the president views this as his way of trying to protect those that have protected him.
Okay, now what makes this particularly interesting is that Adam Schiff was preemptively pardoned by Joe Biden just a short while ago, presumably for his involvement on that January 6th panel. Biden has referenced sort of the vindictive nature of Donald Trump and suggested that he wants to protect people that were involved in ultimately investigating and then, of course, prosecuting as well people that were involved in the January 6th assault on the Capitol. What do you make of all this?
I mean, it's certainly an interesting era in American politics when you are seeking to issue or issuing preemptive pardons on the off chance of who's going to investigate who for what in your political opponents or political enemies. And so the fact that we're at this point, I think, is sad. It's also a really interesting commentary, by the way, on the core institutions of American government. But I think moving forward, the one thing as well that I take from the inauguration speech that we heard was Trump has specifically talked about some of the changes in the Justice Department, what those changes are and how it is they're going to be enacted. Presumably it's going to be about those that investigated him and some of his allies, but also those over the last 4 years that were investigating other matters. And so the perception, of course, again, it goes back to that victim narrative where Trump and his allies believe that they are victims of an overactive Justice Department. And so is it logical to assume there's at least a chance that they would have been seeking to investigate some of those political enemies? Certainly possible when in your inaugural speech you do highlight some of the changes of the Justice Department you want to make.
Johnny, why don't we get to that clip about the two genders? This was something that I think obviously jumped out at a lot of people. A comment on COVID as well. This from Donald Trump. Obviously, I know a lot of you watched the entire speech yesterday, but for those of you that didn't, this was one of the comments from the the now president of the United States that raised a few eyebrows.
As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay.
Thoughts?
To the gender piece, I think sad. I mean, certainly interesting in my
Standing
mind.
ovation, by the way.
Yeah, mostly from the white guys. I mean, what was also really interesting were the number of folks that weren't standing through that. But I think both of those issues are red meat to the political base that helped get him elected. And, so I think that's exactly where that comes from. Do I believe that Donald Trump himself, particularly on the gender issue, based on some of his history throughout his life, throughout his career, if that's a really burning issue for him? Probably not, but I think that was one of the conditions on some of the support from especially the evangelical and socially conservative right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like I appreciate your word sad. I just think it's red meat. I think it's throwing the base something. I think it has nothing to do with what makes Donald Trump tick. And I think that it's a big setback. I understand that people talk about this sort of like fatigue, this like progressive fatigue that a lot of people are experiencing. But to hear him lay it out like that, to be honest, I was a little bit surprised. I didn't expect to hear that as part of the speech. It's only 10 seconds. But it was significant. If that's your reality, if that's your world, that's very significant. Last thing I wanted to ask you about, I want to thank you for your time. You've hung out with us for an hour. That's longer than we asked you for.
I feel bad for you.
No, give me a break. There's so much to talk about. And obviously this audience knows we'll be talking about this for a long time. Other things as well. There's stuff happening closer to home. Coal mining in Alberta, for example, that we'll get to in episodes to come. But yesterday was a Monday, the 20th of January, a huge day. No matter who you vote for, no matter where you lean politically, a huge day. As Donald Trump returns to the White House, he did so with the help and hundreds of millions of dollars, it's estimated, from Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who took to the podium after Trump spoke. People didn't pay much attention to what Elon said until he did something. And for those of you watching on YouTube or any of our other platforms, here it is. For those of you not, you know exactly what we're talking about. Looks an awful lot like a Nazi salute, but here's Elon Musk.
I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you. My heart goes out to you.
All right.
It is thanks to you that the future of civilization is assured.
The future of civilization is assured from my heart to you, as he puts his hand over his heart and then extends it in an all too familiar manner. The internet exploded. What do you think he was trying to do? I don't know. I know you don't know Elon Musk personally, but where's your head at?
I have no idea. What I do know is that if before the end of day one, you have to start asking whether a future cabinet secretary was or was not giving the Nazi salute, you're not off to a great start.
Bingo. Check this out at rollingstone.com. Tim Dickinson's written about this. Right-wing extremists are abuzz, says the article, rollingstone.com, over Musk's straight arm salute. Captured as a still image. I mean, that's the type of thing, and by the way, standing behind the presidential seal, that is quite an image. That's the type of thing that some people are going to print off and frame. But get this, as is reported by Rolling Stone, right-wing extremists are celebrating it. Christopher Pohlhaus is the leader of the notorious neo-Nazi group Blood Tribe. He posted the clip of that salute on Telegram with that lightning bolt emoji. evocative of the Nazi SS symbol, says, "I don't care if this was a mistake. I'm going to enjoy the tears over it." Christopher Hood, neo-Nazi leader, founded the New England race separatist movement, NSC 131, posted the clip to Telegram with a laughing emoji. Andrew Torba, people know, founder of the far-right Christian nationalist social media platform Gab, which pioneered AI-powered Nazi chatbots, shared the clip on his account with the caption, "Incredible things are happening already. Laughing my ass off." So whether or not he meant to do it, it's already being embraced by folks who make no bones about the way they feel about it. And that's obviously, for me, territory laden with red flags.
Well, if those folks see it as in any way, shape, or form as some kind of victory, and if they're reading into it, that's what it could have meant, then I think that becomes the issue for the administration now to have to explain.
Yeah, no kidding. Dr. Bob Murray is a political scientist. He's a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, a longtime friend, and I've always appreciated your insights on international relations, diplomacy, and of course, that U.S.-Canada relationship. Thanks for making time to talk to us today, Bob. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, by the way, I've got Peaches here in our live chat is campaigning to have you brought in as a weekly guest, Bob. So, you never know. We might circle back before you're expecting it. All right. You can follow Bob on Twitter as well. We'll punch that into the show notes on the podcast. And, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll find it there. This conversation has been made possible with the support of Friesen Brothers. And what a remarkable year it is for Friesen Brothers. 2025, they're celebrating 70 years in business, still family-owned. What a run it has been. They started with a butcher shop in Hinton, Alberta, and they've grown since then, still proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Our family, we get our food at Friesen Brothers, and a big part of that is the first of the month. Of course, every grocery purchase, $75 or more, they're going to knock 15% off, and then they have that Family Essentials flyer, which we absolutely love. Quality food, low prices every single day. It's easy family meal solutions plus recipes. You can find it on the website or in store. They've got a QR code to make it nice and easy. That's the Family Essentials flyer online at friesen.com. We're so proud here at Real Talk at Relay, our parent company, to be supporting UCAN Youth Services. This is a nonprofit based out of Edmonton, doing work in the metro region for young adults aged 18 to 25 that basically just need a hand up. They're ready to do the work. They're just on a path that, it's not serving well long term. So the team at UCAN has outreach workers and mental health counselors and all kinds of resources that are ready, willing, and able to get these young adults back on track. Sometimes it's back into employment. Sometimes it's back into education, before employment, whatever it is. UCAN has a team that is just doing remarkable work with a relentless approach, and they're funding that in part due to their comedy nights. I'm excited to be participating in this. No, not on stage. March 10th through the 12th and the 17th through the 19th. You can find out details at ucancomedy.com. They're looking for silent auction donations. If you'd love to find a way to support UCAN Youth Services, this is a great way to get involved. We're doing the same here at Real Talk. Again, you can find details at ucancomedy.com. Complete Care Restoration is in the business of getting folks back on their feet after natural disaster strikes, and they've been doing it for more than a quarter century. They do amazing work restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. If you've experienced a fire, a flood, a sewer backup, or anything else, obviously stuff like mold can be so stressful in a home or a business. Their dedicated team of certified professionals provides 24/7 emergency services, ensuring your property is restored quickly and efficiently. They'll work directly with insurance companies to simplify that claims process for you so you can focus on what matters most. You can find them online, learn more, check out the work they do at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. And a shout out to those of you that are looking for a new opportunity on the work front. You've got a ton of experience. Maybe you've got your ticket as an electrician, or maybe you're just getting your career started. You're at the apprentice stage. Kubi Renewable Energy would love to talk to you. They've got 4 locations. You can find them in Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, and Red Deer. This team is the fastest growing solar team in Western Canada, and they're always looking to add to that team. It doesn't matter that it's the middle of winter. They're not on the roofs right now installing panels, but they're still building up their team for the spring. And that means it's also a great time In addition to checking out the careers link, to also go get a solar quote. If you're thinking of going green this spring, you can get that free quote. Learn more about the process online right now by visiting their recently revamped website. Looks fantastic. Congratulations to them at kubi.ca. The intrepid technical producer of this show, John Hicks, doing an amazing job on the tech side today. Thanks for lining up all those clips for us, buddy. There was a lot of ground to cover. Obviously, Donald Trump saying a lot yesterday as he returns to the White House. It's nice to officially say good morning to you. What do you? I find that people are saying more, and maybe it's just my own. I mean, everybody's algorithm gives them different content, but mine today is more about Elon Musk and that salute than anything else. How about yours?
Yeah, my whole thing was about it, and I'm on both sides. I tend to, is this autism or Asperger's? He's just a socially awkward guy. Nothing against having any of those things, I know
what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? Like him, I think Barron Trump was another one I was watching at the inauguration who kind of is socially awkward and like, they do things kind of without thinking, the spur of the moment, and it happens. Now, whether this was spur of the moment or not, we have to say, first of all, he did it twice, right? So if you do something once, you're in front of a lot of people, you realize, we can go through all sorts of political leaders, presidents, Canadian politicians who have done this salute, not meaning to, and say, does this mean that they're a Nazi? Does this mean that they're a racist? No. But then doing it again, and the other thing is we have to have context here. Like, if you want to say, no, Elon Musk is not a racist. Well, I don't know if he's a racist, but he's liked posts and supported posts on X comparing Jews to controlling the world and conspiracy theories like that. He supported the far right in Britain. He supported the far right in Germany. He's close friends, not just acquaintances, close friends with Meloni in Italy. His parents, if you want to go back, his grandparents on his mother's side have ties to not only the Austrian, but also the German Nazi party. So if you're going to do things like this and then complain that people are painting you as a Nazi, you can't complain when people show the context and show receipts. So does this mean Elon Musk is a functioning, full-fledged member of the Nazi party? No, but it's not good. It doesn't look good, and it makes people go back and look at what you've said and what you've done, and some of that is not good as well.
Yeah, Ben in our live chat powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, says Elon Musk is not a Nazi. He says that is totally, absolutely, 100% ridiculous, and it's lunacy. You have others that are saying, I mean, obviously people are sort of deferring, like Raymond here in the chat. Glad to have you here with us. Says, regarding that salute, I'm going to accept the opinion of numerous Holocaust historians that came out and said it was definitely a Nazi salute. I saw this this graph that was shared. This was a helpful graph.
I don't mean to laugh. I know it's
we'll
serious,
explain it. I thought it was, all things considered, sometimes you just need a chuckle. But I saw this shared on Instagram. We'll describe it for our podcast listeners. And this is kind of like if you imagine, midnight at the 12 o'clock on the clock and 6 o'clock. So we'll say 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. When you raise your hand with your elbow locked to 12 o'clock, that's to call a waiter. Between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock is definitely Nazi. At 3 o'clock or a quarter after 3, it's to call a taxi. At 4 o'clock, it's to pet the tops of the heads of children, your nieces and nephews. At 5 o'clock, you're petting a dog, and at 6 o'clock, you're in resting state. So I hope the folks find that helpful between 1 and 3 o'clock. Maybe 2:45. Definitely a Nazi salute.
Yeah, like me, if I'm in a big crowd and I want to rev them up when I'm DJing, I always call the waiter. Like I always put the
12
the
o'clock
hand fist bump. So for me watching it again, I'll just say I felt like he that's why I showed the end of the clip. You tried to come in there at the end of the clip, and I wanted to play the end of the clip because he said my heart goes out to you, and
yes.
and he put his hand on his heart and went out. But then don't do it again, Elon. But that's the thing where Elon is one of those guys. He says strange things. He's just like all these other CEOs like Zuckerberg. And again, we got to talk about all the CEOs and powerful people at the actual inauguration. But I think he's just a socially awkward guy. And I'm going to chalk this one up to he just did something that he wasn't aware he was doing. But that doesn't mean we can't go back and look at context and look at his family lineage, and look at all the people he supports and say, hey, he does kind of lean this way. He has supported things online that are questionable and that do bring up elements of racism.
Yeah. Another thing I think that would be very simple to do and very easy to do, and I'm just scrolling through to make sure I didn't miss it in the hour or so that we've been recording this episode, but I'm just looking at Elon Musk's account on X right now. Blows my mind. He had like 215 million followers. The guy's got just an enormous platform, to state the least, to say the obvious. But it would be very simple to simply send a quick tweet, to send a quick note that said, I see the kerfuffle, I see the controversy. I was definitely not issuing a Nazi salute.
Well, he put out something last night that was kind of like, it was like not an apology, and then he started kind of commenting on people underneath, and then he deleted it.
Yeah.
I forget what it said exactly, but basically he was equating it to a Roman salute, which is what a lot of people are saying online as well, which is all fine and good. But like, you have to realize what people think when they see this.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not just talking about people who want to paint Elon in a bad light and make him look like an idiot. Those people are out there every day. They're watching every move you do. You're being videotaped all the time. Everything you do is online. I'm talking about the people that this might hurt, and then doing it again. And again, I'm just hoping he didn't know what he was doing in the time frame that it was happening. Maybe today he looks it over. Maybe today he says something where of course he's going to say I'm not a Nazi, whatever. But there are people who like this wrecks them emotionally to see this shit happen.
100%, obviously. Obviously, right? And I sort of think that, Tracy in the chat says Elon's gestures were completely deliberate. Others are saying look what he's pounding his chest ahead of time. It's obvious. Lightning Rod says, never mind, I'm not going to read that comment. Alberta Girl says, and he first hit his chest, says, go check the history books. And then Peaches is losing their mind, says, seriously, a wave chart? It's a joke, Peaches. I hate to have to spell it. That part's a joke. But like Bob Murray said, if you're having to have this conversation on day one on whether or not probably the biggest influence on the president, is there a bigger influence on Donald Trump that we know of than Elon Musk? I don't think so.
No.
If you're having to even have the conversation. Lauren says, well, Elon was excited. But M. Aitken says, locked elbows is the clue. If we're even having to dissect this on day one, I mean, I think it just sort of sets the tone. 2020 was a long time ago. 2016 to 2020, I think we've forgotten that there are Trump politics like nobody else. And be prepared and be ready, because every day there will be something else. It's not the same as every other politician. Every other American president in history comes across as very boring, including Bill Clinton. Very boring compared to Donald Trump and what he can stir up, not just himself, but those around him as well. So,
yeah, and I like that you brought that up, saying, is there anyone more powerful? I don't know, Ryan. I mean, I'll show a picture here. You can describe it to people. I mean, here we've got Elon Musk on the right, So
you've got
SpaceX,
Elon,
Tesla.
You've got right next to him, you've got
CEO of Google.
Sundar Pichai, who's the CEO of Google. Yeah. You got Jeff Bezos, obviously the founder of Amazon, and his new wife. And then you've got Mark Zuckerberg. So basically there, you've got X, SpaceX, Google, Amazon, and Facebook all represented. And people are talking as well, the fact that this is an indoor event, unless you're in Congress, you're not guaranteed a seat. So these seats are prime real estate, and there are a lot of people of influence within the U.S. government or within U.S. politics that were not in that room, that would have wanted to be in that room. And it's just interesting to see people were describing it as billionaires row. I mean, that is who controls the flow of information in the United States.
Well, I was just going to say that. I was going to say not only that, they are right there. You've got the three richest people on the planet. Standing behind you, not in the back, where we could go through the people who were actually at the inauguration in the cheap seats way at the back. The Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, couldn't get in, but Logan Paul is there. Theo Vaughn is there. Conor McGregor is there. These are the people, like you just said, Ryan. I don't think Trump is so much concerned with surrounding himself with people who are super intelligent and want to necessarily help people, whereas he wants powerful people behind him, and he wants what you just said, non-boring entertainment. People are going to spice things up. When things go bad, I will shoot to these people and they will create a diversion and they will be my court jesters and I will deal with things behind the scenes while these guys juggle.
Yeah. Lorraine in here watching us live on YouTube says, can we please go back to boring? We'll see. We'll see if we're going to go back to boring.
I don't think we're going back to boring.
I don't think we're going back
years.
to boring. And I don't think it's going to be boring in Canada. Relatively speaking, it will be boring in Canada, but we've always been relatively boring. It's because our sense of humor is a little bit smarter here.
But it's
and one of
nice.
our greatest exports to the United States have been our comedians.
Yeah.
And we've always infused that talent into the American psyche and into American culture. But this is obviously, as Trump's calling it, the golden age. We'll see what that looks like. We'll see what that means for Canada, but we're going to be right here throughout. And obviously with an engaged audience here, you're proving that to be the case today, Real Talkers. We appreciate it. We know that there's things that we didn't touch on. Maybe there's something that we missed. I thought that I don't know if we have the video handy. Johnny, you've done such an amazing job today with all the elements, but is there
amazing?
The video?
It hurt my mental.
I know it hurt you. It hurt your mental health.
Night.
We're going to go for a run after this, or maybe margaritas.
What do you want?
But when he talks about how he's renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and did you see the reaction? The reaction was, oh my gosh, I'm such an asshole. I can't remember Kamala Harris's husband's name.
I think this is it.
I think he's probably used to being referred to as Kamala Harris's husband. But
Let's try this.
Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris's husband. If you're watching us on YouTube, you got to watch the reaction. It's amazing.
I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you.
Peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families.
Okay, I thought it was there, but anyways, I have so many clips in here. But
This
anyways,
is,
after he talks about that, he went to other countries and he mentioned the Panama Canal and blah, blah, blah. But you're talking about before in his speech, which is the other clip. I don't want to cue up another
We don't have to
one,
play it all, but
yeah, Hillary starts chuckling. The funniest part, though, Ryan.
By the way, Kamala's husband's name, Douglas Emhoff. Just in case he watches this, Douglas, we see you.
The funniest part is Bill. You see him say something like, it was one word. So I don't know what he said, like easy or calm or watch it or whatever, but she starts chuckling. He's not looking at her. He's looking forward, but he can feel her shoulder going like this and hitting him. And he just goes and he says one word and she kind of stops. But yeah, that was all over the internet as well last night, was Hillary chuckling at that.
Yeah. Amy Lauren, you get credit today and 2 points. 2 points for you, Amy, watching us live on Facebook. She helped me out with Kamala's husband's name, Doug Emhoff. So, Amy, that's 2 points for you. Johnny, make sure you note it on the Real Talk scoreboard. And, Amy, stay tuned for details on what you can redeem your points for. So, and obviously, I mean, the hostages thing as well. I tweeted about it when it happened. Great to see the ceasefire. Who knows? I don't know what the ceasefire in that region. I'm going to save my thoughts on that. I hold out hope that there can be peace in that region. It's been such an absolute nightmare and such an absolute disaster, and the death toll and the lack of humanity, and it's just been an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And so how can you not hope and pray and keep your fingers crossed that a ceasefire will stick and that the healing can begin, but the magnitude of that destruction, the magnitude of the hurt is just so wild. Trump definitely taking credit for that, and I don't know if you saw the news conference that Joe Biden had. I don't have the clip pulled, but Joe Biden basically he makes his statement about it, and everybody's familiar when the president makes that statement and then they turn from the podium and they're walking back to the office. And I don't know if you heard, Real Talkers, but a journalist shouted out at the end of the questions. A journalist shouted out, "Is this on you or Trump?"
Yeah.
Like who gets credit, basically. And you can barely hear it. You can barely hear the clip. But Biden turns around. Did you see this? He turns around and he goes, "Is that a joke?" And the journalist goes, "No." And he goes, "Oh." and then he turns back around and keeps walking. And I just thought, obviously maybe that is something that Joe Biden brokered, and I know that probably some people in this chat or people listening to this podcast would give Biden credit for that.
He's still here. He's still sharp on some things.
Yeah.
And
to be honest, I find it hard to believe that it had nothing to do with Donald Trump coming in. Obviously, based on some of the stuff and some of the comments that he made, some of the rumors around what he had told Benjamin Netanyahu about wrapping that up. But
seeing the Bidens and Trump yesterday, I always love that. Like, we're showing photos now, but just the walk up the stairs when the incoming president meets, the current, is always, when Trump met Obama, we were like, what's going to happen when Biden, posed with Trump here? Same thing. I know we saw it last year, but it looked a lot more cordial this year. I don't know if that's whether, Biden's just tired and he's happy to be out, but these guys are smiling next to each other. But then later during the speech, and again, this is just our first highlight day. I'm sure we'll be talking about and showing this all week. Him and Harris really not clapping for a lot of things, including the two genders talk, a lot of other stuff. So I think we should show some clips of that. Like, everyone's asking in the chat right now for reaction vids, but today we just wanted the meat and potatoes. Tomorrow we'll get into more of the reaction videos during the speech.
God bless the chat. I love you guys and holding us to the same standard of CNN and CBC, and it's wonderful.
Oh, gosh.
I saw an allegation that we're ignoring the UCP coal mining story, which broke as we're doing the show. Obviously, we're not, and I have mentioned once in the episode already, if you're just joining us, that's a story, obviously, that we'll pick up on. But there's no bigger story in the world right now than Donald Trump returning to the White House, and I'm grateful to Bob Murray for helping us understand. Bob's got just a wealth of experience and insight.
Super intelligent.
In particular in international relations, Canada-U.S. relations, and I'm grateful that he was able to join us here. On the stuff that resonates with you directly, on the stuff that maybe we missed or didn't touch on that you disagree with, whether that's Elon's salute, whether that's Trump talking about two genders, whether it's drill baby drill, tariffs on February 1st, whatever it is. Obviously, there's a mountain of stuff to tackle here. You can send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We're so grateful for our live tuning audience, but we know most of you are going to be catching the show later in the day. So you can leave a comment on our YouTube episodes. We try our best to read every single one of them, and send us an email as well. That's talk@ryanjesperson.com. Want to remind you as well, of course, you can sign up for our newsletter on our website. You just scroll down. That's the one that goes out, giving you some inside peeks at what happened on the show, what's coming up on the show, and of course, also special events happening. I'm thrilled to let you know, John, that the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic coming up on Saturday, February 1st is officially sold out.
Wow,
so thanks to those of you.
it.
We've got 24 teams. That's it. Johnny's going to be spinning tunes. We got beers and burgers and bonfires, and it's going to be an amazing day, all in support of 3 wonderful charities. If you're curious to attend, or you want to just come and hang out, we invite you to do that as well. It's so much fun at Larry Alexiak Field in St. Albert. You can find out all the details on our website. Coming up this week, the remainder of Real Talk, we're going to bring our conversation close to home. We will be talking about political developments, including the lifting of that coal mining moratorium in Alberta. And coming up on our Friday roundtable, that's just a few episodes from now, it'll be our first chat of 2025 with the co-hosts of The Discourse. Cheryl Lotes, Erica Barudi's returning to the show on Friday. If you have a question you'd love for them to answer, you know what to do with it. Send it to us. We'll talk to you soon.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.